Now, I saw your piece in the New York Post that was published a couple of weeks after the October 7th attack by Hamas on the kibbutzim in southern Israel, the rave festival and all of that. And you, in that editorial, said you thought you understood some of the source for anti-Semitic and anti-Israel sentiment that Jewish students and others were complaining about as coming up on various campuses throughout the country. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to explain what you see as the source of that and how it connects to your experience that you've just been describing in diversity, equity, and inclusion management at the Anza.
Yes. So, when I was asked about post October 7th, campus environments and was I surprised at it? I said I was absolutely not surprised, Glenn, because the things that I had seen very up close, from 2021 all the way through 2023 at Anza College and other California community colleges had shown me the environment that is being produced and guided by senior leadership members as well as faculty members on campuses. And what I mean by that is we had community members come in right when I first started. They went to the Equity Action Council, which is supposed to make the campus a more equitable campus as well. Again, this is all taxpayer funded, taxpayer dollars at work. Community members said, the environment here is hostile towards Jewish faculty, staff, and students. They gave multiple examples, and they gave us some recommendations and some asks that would make them as a community feel more welcome, more included, and more like they belonged on campus. It was things, Glenn, like, please don't start the academic calendar on Rosh Hashanah or, other high holy holidays of the Jewish faith. It had been happening, they told us, for decades. And there had been many complaints made, no changes made. They also mentioned for the students, we have a website page that says Standing Against Racism. And they had some, Black Lives Matter Global Foundation flags up there and Stop AAPI Hate, statements and slogans up there. And they said, would you please just add a little section there that says, we stand against anti-Semitism as well. And they cited the rise in campus anti-Semitism. And, we can even give you cut and paste, that you could put up there saying we stand against it. When we took this back to my team, to talk about it, because it wasn't discussed in the Equity Action Council, and we had these written recommendations. I said, I'd like to get to work on these things. Not only did this person come to the Equity Action Council, but I shared with the team that I had had these needs assessment conversations where faculty members and even senior leadership had mentioned to me these problems with anti-Semitism. And I said, so what are we going to do? And the supervising dean said, we're going to do nothing about it. I said, we're going to do nothing. She said, we also have recommendations from CARE, which is the Council on Islamic Relations. And we've done nothing about those either. And I said, well, could I see those? I mean, my job is to increase inclusion. I'd like to see if any community member or group is asking us to make change. And I was never shown those recommendations from CARE. And when I said, why are we not going to work on, anti-Semitism? It's a clear issue. There's not even a definition of it on our campus. It's something we need to work around. I was told that Jews are white oppressors. And as such...
Told by whom? I'm sorry. Told by whom?
The supervising dean. And that our role and our focus in our department is decentering whiteness. And that's what we needed to be focused on. And I had never heard such terms. That was not in the job description. That was not in any institutional document. This is in our conversation as a team of why we're not going to do this. The answer I was given on why the dean and the supporting staff would not support any work around anti-Semitism, to me, that was something that was a basic. Like, if you have a group that says, we feel like we're being pushed out and it's hostile for us, and your role, and you're being paid, with the community funds to make this a more inclusive environment, And to have people say, no, we're not going to do that. They're white oppressors. And when I pointed out, the Jewish diaspora is very diverse. It's rich. It's broad. How can you classify, that group? Show me where you're even getting that from. I said, I've never even heard terms like this. And they would never produce the evidence for me or show me where they're getting, this classification from even. It was always just, this is the truth. And if you don't agree, you're not welcome here. You're not doing what we wanted you to do here. And so I had to literally just go to community members and to the faculty members who had pointed out to me the problems. And I had to work without a budget and bring in speakers and try to do some education around it for the community, because that was what I was there to do.
Okay, so the answer I'm taking from you to my question of how do we get to anti-Semitism is that the world is divided into oppressors and victims. The oppressors are white, the victims are BIPOC. Mm-hmm. Jews are white, ergo, Jews are oppressors. Palestinians, I guess by extension of this kind of logic, are people of color, are incorporated somehow into the BIPOC coalition. And so they are the victims. And that's their account of this conflict that has ensued over the last 75 years since the founding of the State of Israel. And I guess I want to say about that is a gross oversimplification that actually betrays the responsibility to educate here, regardless of quote unquote whose side you're on. I mean, that we can get to that. We can get to figuring out what we want to say and what we want to do about the conflict and what's wrong and what's right. But let's just understand the circumstance. And that flattens and is ahistorical and ignorant, it would appear to me, and should be objected to strongly, should not be tolerated in an institution of higher education. Pardon me for the little speech there, but that's kind of what I see.
Yes, and unfortunately, Glenn, it's not only being tolerated, it's being held up as the only way to understand, these geopolitical and world issues in many institutions. And if you even suggest that, there's other ways to view this, we don't have to view everything through a matrix of domination and oppression. Even just saying that got me labeled as a pariah. And people saying that I was trying to destroy intersectionality. And all these other kind of accusations that, because of the people I cited, which included your colleague, John McWhorter, that I was leading people to danger, even with my citations, and that I should watch who I cite and be careful about it. This is the environment that people are working in, and often you don't hear about it because, what happens for us as faculty members, we're advised, by, at least I was, by many mentors, Lee, just resign. It'll be like this never happened, and you go to another place. I could have taken that option. I could have done that. But then I felt like there were people who were being very unprofessional bullies and gangsters in a learning environment. And I felt like they had done this before and they would just keep doing it. So if I just disappear quietly and save myself, right, then I'm contributing to the problem as well. So that's why I chose to go public. I knew the risks. I knew that I would probably never get another tenure track position. I was told that directly by some of my mentors. And I said, at this point in time, the risk is too great. We're being told to watch who you cite. You're not going to get in the way of our progress we've made. Just the statements that were made on a one-to-one level and the bullying and intimidation that took place. Once I went public, hearing from people across the nation that it wasn't just California or something weird. Sometimes people say, California, you guys are a little weird over there. That's just the California thing. Right. This is happening all over the place, Glenn.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you, Tabia, because with respect, the Anza Community College in Cupertino, California is hardly, where I'm going to look to see what's representative of American higher education. So what gives you good reason to think that the phenomenon you experienced there, as unhappy as it was, is characteristic of DEI offices in other places, bigger, big state colleges or elite private universities and so on?
It's been an eye-opener for all of us, the news, turning on our news on a weekly basis and seeing, some people are calling them protests, I'm calling them pro-Hamas rallies, seeing the statements that are being made some of the same statements that I had put in my complaints, in my little microcosmic interaction at Anza, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's been a long-standing statement before October 7th, but to many American ears, they had never heard that until, recent times, when you turn on your news and you see children and students being locked up in libraries, teachers in the K through 12 sector who went to a pro-Israel rally, whose students are demanding them being fired and locking them in their offices. I mean, we've seen some really terrible things these past few weeks. And what we've seen, though, Glenn, is the fruits of labor of this toxic ideology writ large. We're seeing what is happening in our K through 12 schools as well as in our colleges and universities. And it's not just California, it's New York, it's a small town, it's a large town. We're seeing it throughout the nation. It's in Washington, D.C. We're seeing people and students, things I never thought I would see on a large scale, celebrating terrorists and terrorism. And saying that, the actions are justified due to systemic racism and oppression. We're hearing the terms that a lot of people, unless you were in a niche field like me in DEI, or if you were an ethnic studies teacher or a gender studies teacher, you might have known those terms before. Now they're mainstreamed. They're on our news. They're in our newspapers. When you go on social media, they're on the social media. And so we're seeing what is being taught manifested in the streets of America. And we're seeing a call for and a support for actual terrorist groups that are identified at the federal level as terrorist groups.
Okay, I have to try to conjure the other side here. Terrorists. One person's terrorist, another person's freedom fighter is the way the cliche goes. You have to view these struggles in historical context. And as far as DEI and anti-Semitism is concerned, no, we're not anti-Semites. We're social justice warriors. We identify with people who are struggling for their freedom. From the river to the sea doesn't mean we want to expel all the Jews. It means that we want political representation on a one person, one vote equal basis for everybody who lives between the river and the sea. The reason that people of color, BIPOCs, are rallying to the side, not of terrorists, you keep calling them terrorists, the reason we're rallying to the side of the people in Gaza who are bound in, blockaded, and subjugated is because we have a sense of solidarity with these kinds of struggles. We've been here before. We've seen the aftermath of European colonialism at the southern tip of the African continent, in the Indian subcontinent where the British ruled for so long, subjugating people in the east. We remember the fight for Algeria against the French colonialists and so on. And as people of color who have struggled against the aftermath of slavery in the New World and everything, we feel solidarity with those struggles. You call us anti-Semites, and in fact, you betray your responsibility to advocate for social justice when you do that. We see further and more deeply than you do. No, the Jewish people are not racially monolithic, but Israel is indeed a product of the West. They got nuclear weapons over there, for crying out loud. How do you think they got them? Where do you think those scientists were educated, etc.? I continue here with my devil's advocate. We're sorry for your unpleasant experience when you encountered some perhaps not entirely well-enlightened advocates of our philosophy, but our philosophy is sound. We're fighting for justice on a global scale, and we identify with the struggle of the Palestinian people.
Yes, and what you just mentioned, those are heartfelt beliefs and attitudes and perspectives. The problem is when you're on an American college campus and you say that's the only perspective you may have here. And if you say anything to differ with it, you're not welcome to be here as a student. You're not welcome to be here as a staff member. If you cite a scholar that goes against that perspective, you are not welcome to exist in the community. We want to just completely tear you down and make it so that you just don't even exist as a person in the community anymore. And that's the danger. For me, I could look at that person who just voiced those opinions and say, all right, well, I'm sure there's some common points that we can identify and agree upon where we could still work together in a civil way. From the other side that you just mentioned, the answer is no, there is no common points. You're a despicable person for even saying or suggesting that there's another way to view this. And, out of solidarity, we're going to make sure we eliminate you and you're neutralized out of the space. And that's the difference between the different perspectives. Someone coming from a classical perspective like myself, who's able to say, we can agree to disagree, right? And we can still work together and hold hands. We can even march together, on some common points. No, there's none of that. There's a pushing out. And even if we disagree on the slogans and the points of history itself, that becomes a reason to eliminate somebody and to neutralize them. There cannot be viewpoint diversity, or even different ways of understanding the world beyond what's being pushed as an orthodoxy upon everybody.